Okay, so welcome to, I'm just going to put my face up on the side here before I get started. Welcome. So thank you so much for joining me this morning. I'm really glad that you had the opportunity to be here and give me the opportunity to share this fantastic tool with you. I've been using it for years. I use it for everything. And I'm obviously not for every small idea or small decision that I have to make, but it has made decision making much easier over the years, and I use it a lot for my clients. So I think you're going to enjoy this. I'm going to share some stories around how decisions affect our business, why this is important, and then I will show you specifically how to use the tool. It's about 30 minutes will be in this. And again, if you have some questions while I'm going along, just put them in the Q&A. I have my Q&A open, and I will be able to answer questions for you with that. No, I don't have my Q&A open. Let me open my. There it is. All right. I have my Q&A open, so I know when questions come in. If you have something, you can just put it in there, and that'll be perfect. All right. So let's move that here, and I will just put this down because you don't need to watch me all the time. All right. So let me start with a story. I learned this a lot of years ago, but it wasn't until I had a friend who approached me and said, should I leave him? And when we started asking the question around, should I leave him? What's going on in your life? Why are you asking this question? What is precipitating this this need to actually maybe get out of your marriage? And she started talking about, well, the kids and her health and her growth and what her future looks like, and her job and the money and the friends and the ease of transition and everything. Just, it felt really overwhelming because every piece that she looked at there was a positive and negative to it. So, for the kids, it would be better for this reason, but worse for this reason. Her health would be better for this reason and worse for this reason. And it felt like a huge cloud of all this information, and her ability to actually focus in on what was truly important for the decision was really difficult. Now we can grasp this one. I like to share this one to start because this is the kind of thing that happens in our lives, and I wanted to make it clear that this tool being so simple the way it is and fairly complex at that point, that will allow you to take all these pieces of how your options can affect what is important in your life, and how you can come out with a result that's actually going to give you what you want and not give you regret. I mean, the hardest part about making decision is sometimes worrying about whether or not you're going to regret making the decision afterwards. And so it's important to understand all the points inside a decision to be able to do it. We like to look at all the options and figure out whether we can do something or do nothing. And oftentimes we choose to do nothing because the possibilities don't seem doable. And sometimes we don't look at all the possibilities when we do this. Having a clear option, clear points, made it easier for this person anyhow to decide that she was going to leave her husband. She had a relatively amicable separation, and the transition was really hard for her and her kids, as the tool had predicted. And she bought him out. He bought her out. She moved out. And the decision to keep the house so that kids could continue with as little change as possible was also a result of the tool that I had shown her so that she could make a really great decision. I'm just going to share really quickly who I am and why this is important to me, because I want to make sure that you understand a little bit about why I do this. The first time I learned this tool was back when I was making the decision to choose whether to leave my career or leave the industry I was in, or take a job or start a business. Like, I just had so many things going on. I just really didn't know where I wanted to go. And I was really worried because I didn't want to have to take a job in my industry that required me to travel long distances. Usually my commute was about an hour and 10 minutes each direction. So it's a couple extra hours a day because I had small children. And there was no jobs in my industry because, as you can see in this picture, I was a technical laboratory technologist, and I worked on machines like this. So I worked on machines that told people what was in their samples, and I also did the science side of extracting the samples. I was the lab manager for a company. And I, had other people that worked for me, and I'd set up the procedures. And so I was very technically inclined. I understood sciences, and that was important to me. But being in my industry meant that I actually had to travel to Toronto, and that was too far for me to go with small children. So trying to figure out how I was going to, what I was going to do and what that actually meant for me was really challenging. And someone else showed me this tool, and I've just kind of honed it down to some really key points because I've been doing this for so long. I want people to be able to do it for themselves. It's so easy, and it just makes things so, if you can make a decision and feel good about it immediately, that is the key to being able to move forward in your business really quickly. And that's what I like to see people do. Okay, so why is decision making so difficult? Just back here a bit, if you don't know, I am not a technical writer or a laboratory technologist or a technical writer anymore. About 14 years ago, I started my own business, and as a result of this tool, and 6 years into that business, I started the business I'm in now, Blitz Business Success, which is as an advisor and business strategist for small incorporated businesses and helping them figure out how they can grow their business. And a lot of times it's around decision making. All right, so why do we have to make so many decisions? Why is this important to our business? And for those people who actually know me or have seen me speak on the Overcome the Overwhelm and my CEO hat process, will know that when we go through this process, there are a lot of roles as a small business owner that we hold for ourselves. Not only are we the key person who can deliver the product that we have in the way that we do it, but we're also in charge of our banking and our administration, and we are the CEO of our companies. And under each of those roles are all the responsibilities that we have to manage and the tasks that those responsibilities come with. And so when I did this assessment for my first company, I realized that I had 40 roles in my company. And over the years, I've come to realize that each role has somewhere between 3 and 9 responsibilities. And under each responsibility, there's somewhere between 8 and 12 tasks that responsibility must manage. So in my first company, there was as little as 960 tasks that were managed, that I had to manage, and as many as 4,320, depending on how many of the 40 roles, how many responsibilities are under each, and how many tasks for each of those. And of those 4,320, 75% were mine. I had other technical writers, I had contractors, I had suppliers and people who did some of the work for me, but 75% of the work inside my small business was mine. And being able to prioritize my days so that I was focusing on the things that were really important to how I was going to grow my business, how I was going to spend my time, how I was going to give my clients the best service possible and still be able to manage the back end of my business so I wasn't falling behind in taxes and I wasn't challenged with my relationships for my contractors and the people that work with me, and particularly how it was going to affect my personal life, because I believe that your life and your business are not separate. We spend a lot of time looking at this balance thing, and it's not a balance with your life on one side and your business on the other side. It's really about how can you find a way to integrate both your business and your life in a way that the way that you live during the time that you're in your roles or your business, it doesn't affect or negatively affect the way that you spend the time with your family and friends. So when I started looking at all these numbers, okay, so I have a lot of time to spend. How else do I spend my days making decisions? Well, a lot of it had to do with, what is it that I needed inside my business? We have marketing, we have to pay for a bookkeeper. There's things that we pay for that are a small amount of money and it's an easier decision making, but some stuff costs us a lot of money, and marketing can be one of those. In an industry, the CMS industry, and CMS stands for Content Management Systems. You don't have to know what that is, but 14 years ago, approximately, or maybe a little longer than that, it was new and it was online, and there were thousands of companies bringing this idea of CMS to the world with new products. And the challenge was that they had to open up a new market that no one knew about, and they were competing with a whole bunch of other people that were doing similar things to them, and no one had a piece of the market, a big piece of the market yet. So they weren't really known. So in an embryo industry where your clients don't understand what the value of it that you have to sell, you have a lot of marketing to do. And I wrote the help systems as a technical writer for 3 different CMS companies. And 2 of them did not invest in marketing the way the 3rd one did. And today, the 3rd one is the only one that is still in business. The other 2 are not. So the decision to actually put money into R&D, put money into coding, put money into creating a great product was fantastic, because I can tell you all 3 had amazing products. And if you were to buy any of the 3 products for your companies, you would have been happy because they had amazing support systems, they had amazing technical people that could help you. But what they didn't have was a way to get their message out that they actually had these amazing things, because they were not putting money towards marketing. And they'd made the wrong decisions for their business. And that's what I don't want for you. I don't want you to make wrong decisions for your business. Another place where we make decisions is around who we spend our time with. So Dr. McClellan of the University of Harvard, he says your reference group, which is the people that you spend the most amount of time with, your reference group determines 95% of your success or failure in life. And so we have to ask ourselves, if our success is determined by who we spend our time with, how are we choosing how to spend our time with the people that are actually going to help us climb this success ladder for our business? Like, who are those people in our business? Who are our mentors or our friends or other places where we network? Who are these key people that are going to make difference? And how do we decide who that is? And I actually take my students at the college, I take them through a process that allows them to evaluate their reference groups, because I want them to feel really good about the people that they start spending the time with when they're trying to grow their business or grow their knowledge base, so that they can be a better employee if they just decide not to be a business owner. Okay, so now we understand where we are using our decision making and the different places that it happens inside our lives and our business. Let's look at the actual steps that we're going to go through. I'm going to take you through a process. The process is the same for everyone, but this was the examples that I'm going to give you were for a woman who had a company. So it was about 30 people in her company, and it is a manufacturing company. And one of her biggest challenges are the people, which I often say to my clients, the best thing about business are the people, the worst thing about business are the people. And people can be a big challenge. And she had a problematic employee. And so we used this to help her make a decision around whether or not it was valuable for the company to actually fire this employee, because it was an option that she had, but she was only looking at the 2. Did she keep him or did she fire him? And not all the, how it's going to affect the business and what the result was going to be. So this is how the tool works. The first step is to list all your options. And I call this the plus, minus, equals. So the plus is the options that you find most beneficial or most positive. In the case of this woman, it was to fire them. And that would be the most positive thing. The second is to answer the, what are the most negative things? So, keeping that employee was her most negative response. And then include other things that might be slightly positive or negative. So what might those do? So for her, it was, well, I guess we could put him on probation, or I guess we could move him to a new position, or I guess we could train him. So we had to do a little bit of brainstorming for her, because she only could see the fire or keep and finding the other pieces. So what are the other options that were available to her? And whether those were positive or negatives for her doesn't really matter. It just wants you to think about whether, what are the positive, what are the negatives, what are the other options? And of course, the final option is to do nothing. So what is that if she does nothing? You always have to put in the do nothing option, because sometimes when we go through the evaluation of these with how they affect you, the do nothing might show up higher than something that you thought would be a better option. And it gives you a better understanding of how your decisions actually affect the things that are important to your business and your life. So if you, again, if you have any questions, just click on the Q&A and you can type it into the Q&A. and then I will answer those as we're going along, and I can give you some examples for your own business if that makes sense. Okay, so step 2, this is list everything that it affects. And this can be just for the business if you're trying to look at something that's very insular inside your business. But I find that oftentimes it may also affect you personally, or it may affect other people personally. So add in anything that it affects. And, how does it affect the stress levels or the company culture, the company brand, or your good name? I mean, think about how firing Steve Jobs at Apple affected their brand. Steve Jobs was the brand of that company, and when they left, they didn't make any more money. They basically just planed along until they hired him back. And the showman that he was, and the way that he thinks, is the way that the company was able to move forward again and make money. So if firing someone means, in her case, means changing the brand of the company, then that's not valuable, and that's not viable for them. So what we looked at was, what was the cost to the company of firing them and retraining or training someone? Or if they were to keep them and send them for training, what was the cost of training or putting them in a new position? What were the legal requirements for them? So that was one of the options that they had in HR, and that can take time and money as well. And you might break them down. So I'm just giving you kind of top level here, but you could actually break the effects down into very specific effects. Like, what are the legal requirements for the HR department? Or what are the legal requirements for the CEO or for you personally? And what does it cost in time, and what does it cost in money, so investment? And some of the other things for them were, how does it affect the coworkers? How did it affect the company moral, the morals of the company or the company culture? And what was the cost? They wanted to know what the cost of keeping them was. So, what is the cost of doing nothing, really, would be what they're looking at. And so they had to find a way of naming that. Okay, so you start with just a plain binary chart. And down the one side, you're going to put your options. And across the second side, you're going to put how it affects you, how the decision will affect you or your business. And as the example that I have for this woman, her company, and firing a person, the options that we looked at here was fire them, give them extra training, put them in a new position, or do nothing for now. And of course, when we did this, the list was much longer. And and the effects that we're only putting 4 effects here, but there was many more effects that we looked at for the company itself. Because of course, some of the other things you might look at for firing them is, do they have a competency that's hard to rehire? Or are they the nephew of the CEO and you're not sure that that's a good option? So it could affect relationships inside the company if that person has a lot of people on their side, but they're still bringing a negative culture to your company. Okay, so some of the effects that we talked about: the overall cost, the cost to retrain, the time for regulations. So they were just specifically looking at doing the, having to bring them in and giving them a report. And so what was the time involved in that? And then the company culture. So how did it affect the company culture? And then what you do is you go through one at a time and you say, well, if I fire them, my overall costs, do they go up or do they go down? And maybe looking after them costs you a lot in dollars. So what they found was that, and this is strictly her numbers, this is you cannot judge someone else's numbers. So I can't put other people's numbers into their charts. They have to do this for themselves. So firing them, she felt, was a very low cost. There was very little costs involved. Now, the training component, because I took this out of hers, the training component itself had costs involved in it that showed up later on. The cost to retrain, she felt, doesn't really make sense with the firing, but we had to put a number in here. So the firing them, if she's not retraining them, that actually is what falls in under the give them extra training. So that probably should be down to a 0 because there's really no cost of retraining them if you fire them. The time to for regulations, she felt was not too bad, so about 6. And then she said that the company culture was most affected by this. So it was a 10. And I'm sorry, was least affected or most affected in a positive way. It's a 10. So you have to remember that the 10s are positive and the 0s are negative. So the negative, the lower it is, the more negative it is. So firing them was actually a higher cost, and I'm doing that reverse. I apologize. The company culture was better, and it was actually a 10. And if you look down to the bottom, doing nothing for now, and the company culture, so let's see if I can show my little thing, the company culture here shows that it is a 0. So they really didn't feel that if they did nothing, that the company culture was the biggest thing that having this person was affecting. And the overall cost of doing nothing was not as overall costly as firing them. So firing them was going to cost them the most. So if dollars were more important to them, then they don't fire them. If time's more important to them, or company culture is more important to them, the overall cost is less to keep them. But when you start adding the things up, what you find is that the best result is your highest result. And their best result when you do the totals was to fire them. And you're totaling your options. You're not totaling the effects, which is sometimes we go, oh, well, the cost to fire them is the you don't need to total your effects. Total your options because you want to know which option is the best option to choose. And you can see here that her best options were to fire him. And the least option, the least best option was to do nothing for now. So she knew that she had to do something. Now these numbers are arbitrary. Again, you can go back and if you did it again, you might get different numbers. Sometimes there's certain items in here that have a heavier weight. So for my friend who was trying to make a decision, anything that affected her children had a heavier weight, and she would multiply them by 2. So those numbers, whatever number she put in there, would give her twice as much value in the totals later on. So if company culture is their biggest focus, their biggest priority, then they need to double this. But if hiring someone and the cost is going to be their biggest one, then they could double this one, and they could find that doing nothing might actually be a better option. So the numbers, like I said, are arbitrary, but they give you an understanding of what options you have and how they affect what it is that's important to you in your business. And I find that even when you're looking at a difference here, the difference of 2 numbers, put them into a new position or fire them, that these 2 may come out as being fairly equal, but one or the other may end up being something that you, when you check in with yourself and the other people that you work with, putting them in a new position becomes the number one choice. So you're doing things because it affects your business differently, not because you just feel emotionally tied to firing them because of how tired you are of dealing with the person. And that's what she was looking at. So for her, it really was putting him in a new position and retraining him, even though firing him was the number one thing. So it gave her a place to move forward. And I can say to you, for the friend who made the decision to leave her husband, it took years for her to find her groove again, to meet the right person, to live the life that was important and easy for her. But she has. And it was because she knew what her priorities were. She worked within her priorities. She kept those in her mind when she was going forward through the transition. And the transition was easier than most people would ever have in a divorce. And she's still friends with her ex-husband, which it makes it much easier for her and him to look after and manage the children that are now adults. And so having this ability to make a decision that you will never feel like you've made the wrong decision. She never regretted this decision. But if she had done it not knowing why she was doing it, that's where the regret comes in. Okay, so I am going to just stop the share. All right. And I would love to open this up for some additional questions. Thank you for joining me today. And I'm just going to stop the recording. And then if there's additional questions, I will open up the Q&A for that.